Julian Hayes and Eleanor Vance were the power couple of New York City's elite. Their seemingly unbreakable bond the stuff of legends for 15 years. It ended poetically and brutally in an avalanche where they died in each other's arms. When they opened their eyes again, they were back at the party for their third wedding anniversary. And the first thing they did, in perfect, unspoken agreement, was call their lawyers. "I need you to draw up divorce papers." Immediately, the air in the lavish private lounge was thick with tension. "He gets 30% of my shares in the company, the penthouse overlooking the Hudson, and half of my overseas trust fund." Eleanor's slender legs were crossed, a perfectly manicured finger tapping a restless rhythm on her knee. After listing her terms, she turned to the man sitting a few feet away. "Do you have any objections to those terms?" Julian leaned back into the plush sofa, a cynical smirk playing on his lips. "None at all. The sooner, the better." The pen nearly slipped from their lawyer, Ms. Wallace's hand. A minute ago, she had been in the main ballroom, gushing to other guests about the couple's fairy tale romance. She quickly masked her shock and nodded. "Of course. I'll get right on it." "Good. Divorce is a serious matter. This needs to be kept completely confidential," Eleanor instructed. After Ms. Wallace left, Julian offered Eleanor a faint smile. "Congratulations, Eleanor. In this life, you finally get to fix your biggest regret. You can go back to your childhood sweetheart." Eleanor shot him a complicated look, her red lips pressed into a thin line. She said nothing, simply standing up and walking out. As her elegant figure disappeared behind the door, Julian's smile slowly vanished. He uncurled his fist, the indentations of his nails still white against his palm, and pushed himself off the sofa. Stepping back into the ballroom, he was hit by a wave of champagne-scented laughter and chatter. Eleanor and Julian's wedding was the event of the decade. It shook all of New York high society. I heard the floral arrangements alone cost 8 figures. She hasn't been seen with another man in all these years. The last time Julian mentioned he wanted to see snow, she canceled all her meetings and flew him to the Alps on her private jet to build a snowman. Did you see the limited edition watch on his wrist? It sold at auction a few days ago for $3 million. I was wondering who the big spender was. Turns out it was Eleanor, buying a little something to keep her husband happy. Julian's gaze cut through the crowd, landing on Eleanor, the radiant center of everyone's attention. She was tall and poised, her deep green velvet gown making her skin look as white as snow, emanating an aura that kept everyone at a polite distance. The compliments he overheard were like tiny needles, pricking at his heart. Julian had been an orphan, living on the streets until the Vance family sponsored his education. After graduating, he joined Vance Industries, working his way up from an intern to Eleanor's executive assistant. Then, the company had gone bankrupt. The rats fled the sinking ship. But he, after seeing the exhaustion and despair in her eyes, had stayed. He was the only one who stayed, helping her rebuild her empire from the ashes, step by step. During those countless nights, they worked side by side. Something more than professional respect had blossomed between them. After one particularly grueling all-nighter, the world had gone black and he'd collapsed. When he woke up, Eleanor was by his hospital bed, her face pale and drawn, dark circles under her eyes. Her eyes were red-rimmed as she gripped his hand and said, her voice heavy with emotion, "Julian, let's be together. Once I get through this crisis, I swear I will never let you down." And she had kept her word. She gave him a magnificent wedding, making him the enviable Mr. Vance in the eyes of the world. Everyone said that Eleanor Vance, as cold and untouchable as a mountain peak, had fallen for a common orphan named Julian Hayes. Julian, too, had believed his life was perfect complete. For 15 years of marriage, Eleanor had cherished him. Even in the avalanche, her last instinct had been to shield him with her own body. But as she lay dying, the name she had whispered was not his. "Caleb, I'm so sorry. My biggest regret is not keeping you and your daughter safe. If there's a next life, I'll protect you both, no matter the cost." Julian's body was already frozen, but his heart had turned colder. Caleb Reed, Eleanor's childhood sweetheart, the one who had abandoned her when she went bankrupt to marry into a wealthy European family. In their previous life, on the night of their third anniversary party, Caleb had shown up at their door, holding his young daughter, his face streaked with tears. "Eleanor," he'd sobbed, "you always said if I was ever in trouble, I could come back to you. My wife is dead. She left me nothing. My family is bankrupt, and there's this 50-year-old predator who keeps trying to force me to be his lover. Eleanor, I'm not asking for anything, just a place for me and my daughter to stay." The request was absurd. Eleanor had refused, giving him a check and sending him on his way. But shortly after leaving, Caleb and his daughter were killed in a car accident. When the news came, Eleanor's voice had been flat, devoid of emotion. It can't be helped. It was just his bad luck. So Julian had always believed she was over him. He never knew that the thorn had remained lodged in her heart. In her final moments, she was still thinking of Caleb. When she was bankrupt and alone, it was Julian who had stayed up with her in a cramped, stuffy office. It was Julian who had taken countless drinks for her when investors tried to harass her, landing himself in the hospital with a bleeding ulcer. It was Julian who had taken a knife for her when a business rival sought revenge, nearly dying in the process. And in the end, her entire life had been a monument to the man who left her when she needed him most. 15 years Julian thought were built on mutual love had been nothing but a lie. Since that was the case, in this life, he would let go. He would let the two childhood sweethearts have their happy ending. Pulling himself from his thoughts, Julian went to the restroom. After making sure he was alone, he dialed a number. "Hello, is this the Phoenix Group? My name is Julian Hayes. I'd like to formally hire you to find my birth parents." There was a pause on the other end. "Mr. Hayes, you finally decided? Last time we spoke, you were still hesitant." "Yes, I've decided." Julian gripped the phone, his voice firm. "I was found on the street when I was 5. All I had was a silver locket with the letter M engraved on it. Whether you can find them or not, I have to try. I'll send you a picture of the locket now." "Thank you." "Don't worry, Mr. Hayes. We'll do everything we can." Hanging up, a genuine warmth finally filled Julian's eyes. In his past life, whenever he'd brought up searching for his family, Eleanor would always say, "You have me. That's enough. You don't need anyone else." At the time, he was so devoted to her that he'd buried the desire. For 15 years. This time, he wouldn't just leave her. He would find the person he was before he ever met her. After the party, Julian and Eleanor rode home in the same car. The silence was heavy. Eleanor kept checking her watch, her brow furrowed with anxiety. Julian knew exactly why. In their past life, it was at 10 o'clock tonight that Caleb Reed had shown up with his daughter. The hands of her Patek Philippe watch had just ticked past 9 when Eleanor couldn't wait any longer. She told the driver to pull over and looked at Julian, hesitating. Julian understood. She wanted to go to the airport to pick Caleb up herself. He opened the car door without a word. "You have something to do, go ahead. I'll get an Uber home." Eleanor gave him a grateful look before telling the driver to hurry. The Rolls-Royce sped away. Julian opened his Uber app, but no cars were available. Gritting his teeth, he started walking briskly toward a taxi stand a mile away, his tall figure casting a long, lonely shadow under the dim streetlights. It took him a long time to finally hail a cab back to their mansion. As he walked in, he saw Eleanor graciously giving a tour to a man and a little girl. Her voice was gentle. "Caleb, it's not easy for you to raise a child alone. You can stay here from now on." "Thank you, Eleanor." Caleb beamed, then turned and saw Julian, a flicker of awkwardness on his face. "You must be Julian. I hope we're not intruding." Eleanor looked up, her gaze sweeping over him indifferently. Julian swallowed the bitterness rising in his throat and offered Caleb a strained smile. "Don't worry, it won't be an intrusion for long." Caleb paused, glancing uncertainly at Eleanor. She frowned but said nothing, just shot Julian a quick look before telling the butler to prepare rooms for Caleb and his daughter. Julian went straight to the master bedroom and started packing a suitcase. When Eleanor returned from settling Caleb in, she saw what he was doing but didn't say a word, just watching him quietly. It was only when Julian picked up his large, sharp plushie to pack that she suddenly reached out and grabbed his arm. "Julian, you don't have to move out so quickly." He looked at her, confused. Eleanor seemed uncomfortable under his gaze, her jaw tightening. "I mean, we just had our anniversary party. If you move out tonight and the paparazzi get a picture, what will people think? It will affect Vance Industries' image, our stock price." "Fine," Julian said, his brow furrowed. "I understand. I won't move out. For now." Eleanor's expression softened. She was about to take the suitcase from him when Caleb's voice drifted from the doorway. "Eleanor, is Julian leaving because of me?" They both turned. Caleb was standing barefoot on the hardwood floor, dressed in simple pajamas, his eyes red. He met Julian's gaze and immediately bowed his head. "Julian, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cause problems between you two. I truly have nowhere else to go." His voice choked with emotion, his posture so deferential it made Julian look like the villain trying to kick him out. Julian took a deep breath. "You don't have to," but Caleb cut him off, turning to leave. "I'm sorry. I'm being a burden. I'll take my daughter and go." "Caleb." Eleanor rushed forward and grabbed his arm. "I told you, You can stay here as long as you need. No one is going to make you leave. Caleb let her hold his wrist, nodding with teary eyes. But the look he shot Julian over her shoulder held a glint of triumph. Tired of the drama, Julian turned and went back into the master bedroom, shutting the door with a firm click, leaving the newly reunited childhood sweethearts outside. That night, Eleanor didn't come to the master bedroom. Julian didn't care to guess where she slept. He tossed and turned, sleep eluding him. The next morning, as Julian entered the dining room, he was greeted by the aroma of a full breakfast spread. Caleb, wearing an apron, carried a platter of creamy pasta to the table, looking every bit the man of the house. "Julian, you're up. Come, try my cooking. I hope you like it." The table was laden with a mix of American and international dishes, beautifully presented. Eleanor was seated at the head of the table. She took a bite of eggs and smiled. "Your cooking is as good as I remember, but you should let the chef handle this from now on. Don't tire yourself out." Caleb naturally took the seat to her right, his eyes holding a hint of challenge as he looked at Julian. "Of course. I just can't believe that after all these years, you still like your eggs soft scrambled, just the way I make them. Good thing I haven't lost my touch." His fingertips lightly brushed her wrist as she held her fork. "Eleanor, you still have this scar? Remember in high school, you fought off 5 bullies for me? Your hand was covered in blood. You were so foolish." Eleanor pulled her sleeve down slightly, her voice soft. "That's all in the past. It doesn't hurt anymore." The two of them exchanged meaningful glances while the little girl sat quietly eating her breakfast. They looked like a perfect, happy family. Julian glanced at them briefly before starting on his own food, but after just a few bites, his stomach churned violently. He clapped a hand over his mouth and ran to the bathroom, heaving into the toilet. Caleb followed, clutching Eleanor's sleeve, his voice timid. "Eleanor, was it something I made? Why is he so sick?" Eleanor's face darkened. She grabbed Julian's arm. "Julian, if you have a problem with Caleb being here, just say it. Don't pull these kind of stunts." Her words caught in her throat. Julian was pressing a hand hard against his stomach, his face deathly pale, a cold sweat beading on his forehead. Seeing him like this, a bolt of realization struck Eleanor, and her expression changed instantly. "Julian, your old condition, it's back." "Eleanor, don't worry about it. I'll schedule the surgery myself," Julian interrupted, gritting his teeth against the pain. He had almost forgotten. In his past life, it was around this time that his chronic stomach problem had flared up, requiring surgery. But back then, Eleanor had been busy with a major project. She had postponed his surgery and then neglected to arrange for proper post-operative care, which led to a poor recovery and lifelong complications. Eleanor obviously remembered, too. She let go of his arm. After sending Caleb back to the dining room to watch his daughter, she closed the bathroom door. After a few seconds of silence, she spoke, her voice strained. "Don't worry. This time, I will personally oversee everything with the hospital. There won't be any mistakes. And I'll hire the best private nurse for your recovery." Julian said nothing, the corners of his eyes red with unspoken irony. "Fine. After the surgery, we can finalize the divorce." Eleanor's expression was strange. "I'll go with you." Julian saw the flicker of pity in her eyes and nodded. That afternoon, Julian and Eleanor went to the private hospital owned by Vance Industries. While they waited in the hallway, she was distracted, constantly scrolling on her phone. When Julian was finally called into the operating room, she barely looked up, just giving a quick nod before her eyes returned to her screen. Lying on the cold operating table, Julian shivered. The anesthesia entered his veins, the scalpel cut into his skin. A tear slid from the corner of his eye. When the surgery was over, Eleanor, who was supposed to be waiting for him, was nowhere to be seen. A bitter laugh escaped Julian's lips. Of course, a woman who had rediscovered her one true love wouldn't waste her time on him. He had been a fool to expect anything else. Under the sympathetic gaze of the nurses, Julian spent the observation period alone in his room. A friend request popped up on his phone. He opened it, and his eyes widened. "Julian, it's Caleb. I know you and Eleanor are getting a divorce. Aren't you curious where she went while you were in surgery?" Julian's finger trembled, but he accepted the request. Caleb's Instagram had been updated with a 9-photo carousel. Eleanor in a floral sundress, laughing with Caleb's daughter on a pirate ship ride in a merry-go-round. The center photo showed the two of them leaning over the child as she blew out birthday candles. The look in Eleanor's eyes as she watched them was one of pure, maternal adoration. They looked like a real family. Julian felt a sharp sting in his heart. While he was lying on an operating table in agony, Eleanor was at an amusement park, celebrating someone else's child's birthday. The next day, Julian checked himself out of the hospital. He dragged his weak body back to the mansion, only to nearly trip over a sea of gift boxes in the living room. Eleanor was with Caleb and the child, opening presents. Seeing him, she rushed over to steady him. Her guilt was visible when she saw his pale lips. "I'm sorry. Yesterday was Lily's birthday. The poor girl doesn't have a mother, so I wanted to make it special for her. It was wrong of me to break my promise to be there. Name your price, whatever you want as compensation." Julian glanced at Caleb's resentful face and pushed her hand away. "I don't need anything. I just want to rest." He walked through the minefield of presents toward the master bedroom. Eleanor turned to the butler, "Mr. Peterson, have the kitchen make a bowl of chicken noodle soup and bring it to the master bedroom." An hour later, there was a knock on the door. Caleb entered, leading his daughter by the hand and carrying a tray with the soup. "Julian, you should eat this while it's hot. It's good for your recovery." Julian sat up, his face impassive. As he reached for the bowl, Caleb's expression twisted into a vicious snarl. "Julian, you're nothing but a beggar who survived on the Vance family's charity. What right do you have to be Eleanor's husband?" he hissed. "You're about to be divorced, but you're still leeching off her. You think you deserve this soup? Since you have no shame, don't blame me for what happens next." With that, he tipped his hand, and the entire bowl of steaming hot soup splashed on his own 4-year-old daughter. "Wah!" The child's scream echoed through the mansion. Julian froze. He couldn't believe Caleb would be so cruel as to use his own child. Eleanor rushed in at the sound. She saw Caleb holding the crying child, his eyes red with anguish. "Julian," he choked out, "if you don't want us here, just say so. You don't have to take it out on a child." Eleanor saw the little girl's red, scalded hand and immediately told Mr. Peterson to take her to the hospital. After Caleb left, sobbing, only the two of them remained. Eleanor glared at Julian, her eyes blazing. "Julian, I can't believe you'd stoop so low. She's just a little girl, how could you?" "I didn't do anything," Julian protested. "It was Caleb." Still lying. Why would Caleb hurt his own daughter? "Since you refused to part on good terms, you can move into the storage room." She grabbed Julian, pulling him out of bed. Ignoring the shocked stares of the staff, she dragged him to the dusty, cobweb-filled storage room in the attic. "You will stay here until the divorce is final. You're not going anywhere." Tears welled in Julian's eyes, his voice trembling. "Eleanor, you think I want to be here? I'm not staying in a storage room. I'm moving out." "Don't even think about it," she snapped. "Don't forget, how much you get in this divorce depends entirely on my mood. If I want to, I can leave you with nothing. You'll be back on the streets where you started." Julian froze, all the fight draining out of him. She knew he had really been homeless as a child. It was his most shameful memory, and she had just thrown it in his face. The people closest to you always know exactly where to stick the knife. Seeing the tears glistening in his eyes and his trembling lips, Eleanor realized she'd gone too far. But the image of the child's red hand hardened her heart. She shoved him inside and slammed the door. "I'm going to the hospital. You can stay in there and think about what you've done until Caleb and Lily get back. When you're ready to admit you were wrong, you can come out." The room was dark and musty, filled with unsettling scratching sounds. Suddenly, a large rat with a long tail scurried across Julian's bare foot. "Ah!" he screamed, pounding on the door. "Eleanor, there are rats. Please, you know I'm terrified of them. Let me out. I was wrong. I'm sorry I was wrong." But her footsteps had already faded away. The staff had their orders. No one dared to open the door. He pounded until his hands were raw and bleeding, finally slumping to the floor in exhaustion. He stared at the sliver of light under the door, curling into a ball and covering his ears. The childhood terror of nearly having his finger bitten off by a rat intertwined with Eleanor's past promises, suffocating him. "Julian, this mansion is our home. You'll always be safe here." A sharp pain erupted from his abdomen. A warm liquid spread from his surgical incision, quickly soaking his thin pajamas. Julian couldn't hold on any longer. His vision went black, and he lost consciousness. He didn't know how much time had passed. His eyelashes fluttered, and he slowly opened his eyes to the sterile white ceiling of a hospital. Eleanor was sitting beside him, her hair a mess, her beautiful face etched with exhaustion. She met his vacant gaze, flinched, and finally softened her tone. "Julian, we don't have to make this so ugly. Caleb and Lily are in the pediatric ward upstairs. Just go apologize to them. If they forgive you, we can put this behind us." She paused. "Everything I promised you in the settlement, you'll still get. Nothing will change." Julian looked at her as if she were a stranger. After a long moment, a dry, humorless smile touched his lips. "Okay." Eleanor had just started to relax when her phone rang. It was Ms. Wallace, their lawyer. Ms. Vance, the divorce agreement is ready as per your instructions. When would be a convenient time for you and Mr. Hayes to sign? Julian's eyes lit up when he heard the voice from the phone. Ms. Wallace, right now. You can come straight to the hospital. I'm busy today. Some other time. Eleanor cut in sharply, then hung up. Julian frowned in confusion. Eleanor saw his eager expression and felt a surge of irritation. She was the one who wanted the divorce most, wasn't she? So why did his happiness bother her so much? The more she thought about it, the more annoyed she became. You haven't apologized yet, she said, her teeth clenched. Until this is resolved, we're not signing anything. Julian nodded, then took her phone and called the mansion. A short while later, a staff member arrived with a polished sandalwood box. Eleanor thought it looked familiar. Her face fell when Julian walked into the pediatric ward and opened the box for Caleb. Mr. Reed, I didn't get Lily anything for her birthday. Please accept this. I hope it's not too much. Inside the box lay a gleaming, vintage gold watch. Caleb's eyes widened, but he feigned modesty. Julian, this is far too valuable. Take it, Julian said, his voice flat. It's a family heirloom. It was meant for my future child. At that, Caleb was speechless. Eleanor snatched the box, dragged Julian back to his room, and slammed the door. Julian, what are you playing at now? She demanded, her face dark. You wanted me to apologize, didn't you? Julian asked, genuinely bewildered. Why are you so angry? Eleanor's face grew even darker. Just get some rest, she finally managed. We'll talk about this later. She gave the box to the staff member to take back and stormed out of the room. 3 days later, Julian was discharged. Eleanor insisted on driving him, but when she opened the door of the Rolls-Royce, her family of 3 was already in the back seat. Without a word, he got in the front passenger seat. The entire ride, Eleanor was busy laughing and playing with the child, the atmosphere warm and domestic. In the front, the driver kept sneaking nervous glances at Julian's expressionless face, not daring to breathe too loudly. When they got back to the mansion, Ms. Wallace was already waiting with her briefcase. Seeing Eleanor's displeasure, Julian spoke up. I asked her to come. Caleb tactfully took the child and disappeared into a room. The divorce agreement was laid out on the coffee table, 2 copies. Without a moment's hesitation, Julian signed his name. Beside him, Eleanor stared at his moving pen, unmoving. Only when Julian pushed the signed document in front of her and tapped the paper did she snap out her trance. She grabbed a pen and quickly signed her name. Ms. Wallace let out a sigh of relief. The agreement is signed. After the 1-month cooling-off period, you can both receive your official divorce decree. A genuine smile finally appeared on Julian's face. Thank you for your help, Ms. Wallace. After seeing the lawyer out, Julian immediately started packing. Eleanor leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed, her tone condescending. What are you doing now? Until you have that decree in your hand, you'd better behave. Don't cause any trouble for me or the Vance family. Julian didn't even look up. Don't worry, I won't. I just can't stand the sight of your happy little family. It's better for me to move out and not have to see it. The words hit their mark. Eleanor was speechless for a moment, swallowing hard, but she didn't argue. Julian packed quickly. The closet was half empty. The matching silk pajamas now just a lone set for her. The vanity was cleared, not even a bottle of aftershave left behind. The sharp plushie he had hugged for 3 years was stuffed into a box. Watching the room empty out, Eleanor felt a hollow ache in her chest, as if a part of her was being carved out. Julian sealed the last box, then took the ring off his finger and placed it gently on the vanity. His voice was devoid of emotion. I'll leave the ring here. Eleanor stared at the ring, then turned and walked away, her steps so fast it was as if she were fleeing. Do what you want, she threw over her shoulder. Julian was sitting on the sofa, checking his moving list, when his phone rang. It was the private investigator. Mr. Hayes, we found your family. They're living abroad. It turns out you were lost in an accident years ago. Once we confirm the relationship with a DNA test, they'll send someone to bring you home. Julian's eyes lit up, the hand holding the phone trembling. Really? That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Suddenly, Eleanor's tense voice came from behind him. Julian, where are you going? Who's coming to get you? Julian turned and saw her staring at him, her eyes searching his face. He ended the call, his voice calm. It's nothing, just coordinating with the moving company. Eleanor frowned, but didn't press him. A vague unease settled over her, a feeling that something was slipping from her control. But then she thought, Julian has no one. Even after the divorce, where could he possibly go? She walked over to him, her voice softer. If you ever need anything, you can always come to me. We had 15 years together. Even if we're not husband and wife, we can still be family. She paused. Just don't go too far. The penthouse on the Hudson is a perfect distance. Julian didn't respond, just gave a slight nod. After Eleanor left, he picked up his suitcases and walked out of the mansion he had called home for 15 years, without a single look back. The penthouse was exquisitely decorated in a southern French style, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rushing river. Julian dropped his bags in a corner, walked to the window, and stretched, a real smile finally gracing his lips. He took out his phone and started searching for design schools abroad, then looked up flights to South America and Europe. He no longer had to revolve around Eleanor, no longer had to watch Caleb's pathetic act. He was about to be reunited with his family. He could study what he'd always wanted to study, travel the world. His life was full of possibilities again. Lost in thought, a wave of exhaustion washed over him, and he fell asleep on the sofa. He didn't know how much time had passed before he was jolted awake by a thunderous pounding on the door. Julian stumbled to the door, rubbing his eyes. Before he could even see who it was, Eleanor grabbed him by the collar. A vein throbbed in her temple as she screamed, "Julian, where did you hide Lily?" At the same time, a group of security guards stormed into the apartment, tearing it apart. Caleb, his eyes red and swollen, fell to his knees the moment he saw Julian, clutching his pants and sobbing. "Julian, Lily is my whole life. Please just give her back to me. I'll leave Eleanor. I'll get out of your sight, forever." He wailed, but his eyes darted around the living room. At the river view, the Italian leather sofa, the expensive art on the walls, a flicker of greed in their depths. Julian frowned, shaking him off. "I haven't seen your daughter. Don't accuse me of things I didn't do. You dare deny it?" Eleanor shoved her phone in his face. The security footage showed a man in a black mask and baseball cap, snatching Lily from the front of the mansion when a nanny wasn't looking. The man's build and clothes were identical to Julian's. "You're telling me this isn't you? The camera caught you clear as day." Just then, a guard rushed out of the bedroom, holding up a small silver bracelet engraved with the name Lily. "Ma'am, I found this in the nightstand." Eleanor's grip on Julian's wrist tightened, her eyes burning with rage. "Julian, I was so wrong about you. If you hate me for the divorce, take it out on me. What kind of monster goes after a child?" Two guards stepped forward, grabbing Julian and forcing him to his knees. The impact on the cold marble floor sent a shock of pain through him, but his heart hurt more. The woman who, just that morning, had spoken of their 15 years together, was now condemning him based on a grainy video and a planted bracelet. How absurd. This was the woman he had loved and trusted for 15 years. Tears welled in Julian's eyes as he looked up at her defiantly. "It wasn't me. A silhouette proves nothing. I've never seen that bracelet before. How can you sentence me without proof?" Eleanor hesitated for a second, seeing the tears in his eyes. But before she could speak, Caleb's phone rang. He answered it, his voice trembling with excitement. "What? You found Lily? Where?" Okay, we're on our way." He hung up, tears of joy streaming down his face. "Eleanor, they found Lily. Watch him. Don't let him go anywhere." Eleanor snapped to the guards, then grabbed Caleb and rushed out, not giving Julian another glance. The remaining guards swarmed after them, leaving two behind to stand over Julian. As Julian's knees grew numb, one of the guards answered a call. After hanging up, he turned to his partner. "Orders from above. Give him a lesson. Double bonus if we do a good job." A knot of dread tightened in Julian's stomach. Before he could react, one of them grabbed him by the hair and slammed his head against the floor. The back of his head hit the marble with a sickening crack, and his vision exploded with black spots. Fists and feet rained down on him. Pain erupted from every inch of his body. He curled into a ball, tried to protect his head, feeling as if his organs were being rearranged. A metallic taste filled his throat, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood, staining the expensive rug. Through a haze of pain, Julian's phone, which had been left on the sofa, started ringing. A guard stopped, picked it up, and held it to his ear. Eleanor's voice, cold as ice, came through the speaker. "Julian, we found child. In an abandoned garage, 500 yards from the penthouse. She was locked in a cabinet. She nearly suffocated. She said it was you who took her." The words were like a bucket of ice water, freezing his heart. "No, it wasn't me." "Julian, children don't lie," Eleanor said, her voice hoarse with disappointment. "When you agreed to the divorce so easily, I thought you actually understood. I thought you were willing to let go. I never imagined you were plotting something like this, using a child to get revenge. Julian, when did you become so cruel?" His head was pressed to the floor by a heavy boot, tears mixing with blood on the cold marble. "Eleanor, you have to believe me, it really wasn't me." She didn't believe him. Her tone turned to steel. Julian, you crossed a line. For the sake of our years together, I won't call the police. But the settlement we agreed on is void. All of it. Get out of the penthouse. Now, the call ended. The guard chuckled, grinding his shoe on Julian's hand. You heard her. Get out. Like a piece of trash, they dragged him and his suitcases to the curb and left him there. The sky opened up, and a torrential rain began to fall. The heavy drops felt like stones hitting his bruised body. He was in agony. Every movement was torture. With the last of his strength, he managed to flag down a taxi. At the hospital, only a young intern was available to give him basic first aid. I heard Ms. Vance's kid was brought in, the nurse chattered. All the senior staff were reassigned to that case. You should have seen her. She's usually so composed on TV, but she was cried her eyes out over that child. Listening to the nurse, Julian's heart felt like a dead, empty space. While he was being beaten half to death, she was crying for Caleb's child. They say when you love someone, you love everything about them. A bitter smile twisted Julian's lips. He had been so naive. He had underestimated Eleanor's love for Caleb and overestimated the sliver of affection she might have had for him. In the face of her true love, he, the discarded ex-husband, didn't even merit a second thought. When it came time to pay, Julian discovered all his cards had been frozen. He had to sell his watch, the only valuable thing he had left, to another patient's family member to cover the bill. It was the watch Eleanor had given him for their first anniversary. Selling it was for the best. When he left the hospital, the rain had stopped. A crescent moon hung in the night sky. The city lights twinkled, but not a single one was for him. Standing on the edge of a busy street, Julian felt a vast, cold hole open up inside him. He rented a room in a rundown part of the Bronx for $600 a month. It was small and dark with peeling paint and a squeaky wooden bed that took up most of the space. Lying on the bed, enduring the pain, he called Eleanor again and again. She rejected the call 19 times before finally blocking his number. He opened his iMessage and typed out a long text, explaining everything, that the silhouette in the video wasn't him, that the bracelet was planted, that her guards had beaten him. But when he hit send, a red exclamation point appeared. Message failed to deliver. His finger froze on the screen. After a long moment, his arm fell limp at his side. He gave up. Once he recovered, Julian, now without an income, tried to find an office job. Every resume he sent out was met with silence. He soon realized he had been blacklisted across the entire city. Standing under the blazing sun, clutching his resume, a chill ran down his spine. He had no choice but to take odd, cash-in-hand jobs, handing out flyers, cleaning houses, working as a temporary package sorter at a warehouse. He did anything he could to survive. One evening, dragging his exhausted body back to his apartment, a handkerchief was suddenly pressed over his mouth and nose. He struggled for a moment, then everything went black. When he came to, the first thing he saw was a lavish crystal chandelier. The second was the bloated, leering face of an old woman. Ah! Julian screamed and tried to scramble away, but his body was weak. She yanked him back easily. Shoo! Quiet now. The old woman wheezed, her cloudy eyes raking over him as she started to unbuckle his belt. That boy wasn't lying. Send me a real handsome one to take his place. I'm going to enjoy this. Ha ha ha. Julian struggled frantically, his voice shaking. You can't touch me. Do you know who I am? I know, Eleanor Vance's ex-husband. The woman sneered, tearing at his clothes. Sweetheart, she's already thrown you away. Stop thinking about her. You stick with me, and I'll make sure you live like a king again. Ouch! The woman suddenly cried out, clutching her forehead as blood seeped through her fingers. You bastard, you hit me. I'll kill you. Julian scrambled off the bed, dropping the blood-stained table lamp, and ran for the door. But as he opened it, he was met by several large bodyguards. He turned and fled to the window. Seeing it was only the second floor, he jumped. He went that way. Split up. The footsteps faded into the distance. Julian huddled behind the wall of a large mansion, waiting until it was completely silent before daring to stand. He'd twisted his ankle in the fall. Biting his lip against the pain, he started to limp away. But as he passed by a large picture window, he froze. Somehow, he had ended up back at the house he had shared with Eleanor. Dusk was settling, and warm yellow light spilled from the windows onto the manicured lawn. Inside, Eleanor, wearing a fluffy cartoon print sweater, was on the floor, building a block tower with Lily. Caleb sat beside them, cutting paper stars, a gentle smile on his face. Julian's mind went blank. He looked at the living room, and his vision blurred. The Monet print he had personally hung was replaced with a pink cartoon mural. The elegant gray sofa he had chosen was now a bright yellow leather one. The display cabinet where he kept his small, carved wooden sculptures had been dismantled to make way for a children's playpen. Every trace of him in this house had been erased, and the woman who had allowed it all was now holding Caleb's daughter's hand, smiling like a loving mother. The heart he thought was long dead ached with 1,000 tiny cuts. The warm, happy family life he had once dreamed of had come true. The leading lady was Eleanor, but the leading man was someone else. Julian felt like a thief, hiding in the shadows, spying on a happiness that was not his. In that moment, his heart finally died. He didn't cry for help. Like a lonely ghost, he turned and melted back into the night, and he did not look back once. Inside, Eleanor suddenly looked up, her gaze drifting to the window. A tall, thin silhouette vanished around the corner. She frowned, an inexplicable unease rising in her chest. Her phone rang. It was Ms. Wallace. Ms. Vance, regarding the amendment to the divorce agreement to leave Mr. Hayes with no assets. The new terms have been drafted. What would be a convenient time for you to review them? Eleanor's gaze fell on a small wooden shark sculpture on a corner shelf. Most of Julian's collection had been thrown out at Caleb's insistence. This little shark must have been missed. Her heart softened unexpectedly. Don't change the agreement. We'll proceed with the original terms. She hung up, not noticing the venomous glint in Caleb's eyes as he stood behind her. Half a month passed. One sweltering day, Julian was on the street handing out flyers, sweating inside a heavy mascot costume, when the PI agency called. Mr. Hayes, the DNA test is a match. You are related to the family. They've already sent someone to pick you up. Julian excitedly asked for details about his family, but the agent was coy. You'll find out everything when you meet them. He clutched the sweat-soaked cash in his hand, a sliver of sweetness finally cutting through the bitterness in his heart. Soon, he would be with his family. He wouldn't be alone anymore. The next second, he was struck from behind, and the world went dark. When he woke up, he was curled inside a sealed wooden crate. His hands and feet were bound with thick rope. He tried to scream, but his mouth was sealed shut with duct tape. Panic seized him. He struggled violently, his body thudding against the wooden planks. Well, look who's awake, a gravelly voice said from outside the crate. Don't waste your energy. This thing is nailed shut. He heard the sound of a phone being put on speaker. Caleb's malicious voice seeped through the wood. Don't blame me, Julian. Blame the fact that, even after you were gone, Eleanor was still willing to give you so much money. His voice grew shrill. You think a beggar like you deserves any of that? That's our money. Why should you get a cut? However, if Eleanor were to become a widow, her assets wouldn't need to be split with an outsider. So Julian just died. In the background, Julian could faintly hear the happy sounds of Eleanor and the child playing. He began to struggle frantically, muffled sobs escaping his throat. Caleb, who are you talking to? Eleanor's voice called out from a distance. Caleb's tone instantly became gentle. No one, just a telemarketer. The call ended. The last glimmer of light in Julian's eyes died. All right, time to go. He heard the sound of dirt being shoveled onto the crate. The air grew thin. In his despair, he clawed at the walls of his prison. His nails broke, his fingertips bled, leaving frantic, bloody streaks on the wood. Tears streamed down his face. He had already left. He wasn't bothering them anymore. Why did they have to hunt him down? He was so close to finally meeting his family. So close. 7 days later. The cooling-off period was over. Today was the day to go to the city clerk's office and finalize the divorce. Eleanor had been on edge for the past few days, her thoughts drifting to Julian constantly. At dinner, she would wonder if he was eating well, if his stomach was hurting. She remembered his fear of rats and worried about the conditions of wherever he was living. He used to have nightmares and would cling to her until he fell back asleep. How had he been coping these past few nights? She fiddled with the small wooden shark sculpture. She had only meant to teach him a lesson. He had crossed her line. He had been coddled for so long. He didn't know how harsh the world could be. A little hardship would be good for him. If he knew he was still getting the full settlement, he would probably be thrilled. With that thought, Eleanor took out her phone to text him. Be at the clerk's office at 3 p.m. today. Don't be late. She hit send, but a red exclamation point appeared. She frowned. She hadn't expected him to be so petty as to block her. Eleanor, about our engagement party. Caleb walked in, leaning softly against her. Later, I have to deal with something urgent, Eleanor said, grabbing her jacket and heading for the door. The feeling of unease was growing stronger. Just then, her phone rang shrilly. Is this Ms. Eleanor Vance? This is the NYPD Major Case Squad. A man's body was discovered at a construction site in the West End. We have reason to believe it may be your husband, Julian Hayes. We need you to come to the precinct as soon as possible to assist with the investigation. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered on the floor. The world went silent. Eleanor stood frozen until the urgent voice from the phone broke through. Ms. Vance? Are you there? She snapped back to reality, snatching the phone from the floor, but her throat was tight and no sound would come out. What do you mean, a body that may be Julian's? Impossible. Finally, she heard her own strained, hoarse voice. Officer, there must be a mistake. Julian, he couldn't be. We need you to come in to confirm the details. Please, as soon as you can. The tone was all business. Eleanor didn't know how she managed to drive to the precinct. The room they put her in was lit by cold, white fluorescent lights, the atmosphere heavy. A detective with a serious expression introduced herself as Detective Miller. Ms. Vance, please have a seat. Detective Miller placed several photos on the table. This morning, workers at a construction site dug up a sealed wooden crate. Inside, they found the body of a deceased male. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. The photos felt like a black hole, threatening to swallow her whole. A silver locket with the letter M engraved on it. Julian's driver's license. The inside of the crate, covered in horrifying bloody scratch marks. And the last photo, a body, dressed in the same clothes Julian had been wearing when he left the mansion. The detective had thoughtfully covered most of the body in the picture. The heat has caused significant decomposition. It's quite graphic. Eleanor stared at the familiar corner of the shirt, her pupils constricting as her world fell apart. The detective's subsequent words about taking a statement and running a DNA comparison sounded distant, and she could only nod numbly. Ms. Vance, Detective Miller began, opening her notebook. Can you recall the last time you saw Mr. Hayes? Eleanor's mind went blank. The last time. It was a month ago at the penthouse on the Hudson. And you've had no contact since? No. What was his social life like? Did he have any enemies? Anyone you can think of who might have wished him harm? Eleanor shook her head instinctively. He was kind to everyone. He didn't have any enemies. An image of Caleb's tear-streaked, pleading face flashed in her mind, and she quickly suppressed it. We understand you were in the process of a divorce. Detective Miller's question was direct. Yes. Were there any major disputes regarding the division of assets? Eleanor swallowed. No. The agreement was already signed. Detective Miller looked up at her, her gaze sharp and appraising. From what we understand, you and Mr. Hayes were known as a model couple. If you don't mind my asking, why the divorce? Eleanor was silent. The reason? Was it the regret that had crystallized after the avalanche? Was it guilt and a need to compensate Caleb and his daughter? Or was it that she had simply grown tired of a 15-year-long perfect marriage? All these vague, complex reasons now seemed pale and ridiculous. We grew apart, she finally said. The detective didn't press further and closed her notebook. Just then, another officer knocked and entered, handing Detective Miller a freshly printed document and whispering something to her. Detective Miller's expression grew even more grave as she read it. She looked up at Eleanor's ashen face. Ms. Vance, the DNA results are in. The victim's identity has been confirmed. It's Julian Hayes. Eleanor swayed, her fingers digging into the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. The medical examiner's preliminary finding is cause of death by asphyxiation, the detective continued. There were signs of a violent struggle inside the crate. We believe the victim was buried alive. Time of death is estimated to be approximately 8 days ago. Buried alive. 8 days ago. Every word was a hammer blow to Eleanor's heart. She could almost see it, the small, dark space, his desperate hands clawing at the wood, his nails breaking, blood everywhere. He was so afraid of the dark, so terrified of tight spaces, and he had died alone, underground. The pain was so intense, she couldn't breathe. Ms. Vance? Detective Miller's voice pulled her back. Given that the time of death falls within your divorce cooling-off period and involves significant financial assets, we need you to explain the situation in detail. What exactly happened the last time you saw Mr. Hayes? The interrogation had begun. Eleanor painfully recounted the events at the penthouse. With every word, the detective's questions grew sharper. You're saying that based on a grainy video where you can't see a face and the word of a child, you convicted a man who stood to gain billions in a divorce settlement of kidnapping. After the child's accusation, did you give Mr. Hayes a chance to defend himself? What did you believe his motive was? To extort more money? Or was it simply revenge? Each question was a slap in the face. The fortress of certainty she had built around herself began to crumble. She She had been so consumed by rage, so convinced of his wickedness, she hadn't even considered listening to his side of the story. Why? Because she had subconsciously already believed Caleb's tears, believed the narrative he had spun of Julian being consumed by jealousy. Because she was desperate to prove her loyalty and authority to Caleb. Because she had never truly trusted Julian. The realization was terrifying. Her lawyer arrived just in time, and after the allotted time, Eleanor was released pending further investigation. She walked out of the precinct on unsteady legs. The sun was bright, but she felt a bone-deep chill. Caleb rushed to her, his face a mask of sorrow. "Eleanor, how could they do this to you? Are you okay?" Eleanor barely registered his presence, pushing past him with empty eyes. The detective's final words echoed in her mind. "This so-called kidnapping case is full of holes. Ms. Vance, don't you think you acted a bit rashly?" Her mind was a chaotic storm. She couldn't think. She drove home on autopilot. Back at the mansion, Eleanor locked herself in her study. The night was dark outside, but sleep was impossible. The detective's words, the ME's findings, and her own horrifying imaginings of Julian's last moments tortured her. Suddenly, she doubled over, gagging, but her stomach was empty. The next day, she summoned Mr. Peterson and all the staff who had been present during the soup incident. A quiet maid who rarely spoke finally came forward, her voice trembling. "Ma'am, I was passing by the master bedroom that day. When the bowl fell, it looked strange. Almost like Mr. Reed dropped it on purpose. And, after the little master got burned, he looked at Mr. Reed first. He looked scared." Eleanor's heart sank. She found Lily and, as gently as she could, asked her about that day. The child, busy with her toys, mumbled, "Daddy said Lily was being bad. Daddy was going to burn Lily." The color drained from Eleanor's face. Just then, Detective Miller called, asking her to come back to the precinct. Eleanor didn't know how she got there. The room was even colder and more imposing than before. Detective Miller played a security video without any preamble. It was Julian's complete movements on the day of the alleged kidnapping. The footage clearly showed him leaving the mansion, taking a taxi directly to the penthouse, and entering the building. The timestamp on the footage was continuous. There were no gaps, no record of him leaving the building until hours later, when she had burst in with her security team. The forensic evidence is conclusive. From the moment Mr. Hayes entered that building to the moment you arrived, he never left, Detective Miller stated, her voice calm. "Ms. Vance, Mr. Hayes did not have the opportunity to commit this crime. This alleged kidnapping needs to be reinvestigated." Eleanor stared at the screen, at the lonely figure of Julian walking into the elevator. Her throat was tight, and she couldn't speak. "Generally," Detective Miller said, her eyes sharp as she looked at Eleanor, "the person who benefits most from a crime is also the primary suspect." Eleanor's heart clenched. "I imagine, Ms. Vance, that you have someone in mind." The words hit her like a bullet. Caleb's tear-streaked face, the child's fearful eyes, the maid's timid testimony. All the pieces slammed together in her mind, forming a horrific truth. She shot to her feet, the legs of her chair screeching against the floor. Without a word, she stumbled out of the precinct. She sped back to the mansion. Caleb was lounging on the living room sofa in a silk robe, casually eating fruit. "Eleanor, you're back." His words died on his lips, his smile freezing as he saw her expression. Eleanor walked toward him, her eyes terrifyingly cold. "The chicken noodle soup," she said, her voice a dead calm before the storm. "What really happened?" Caleb's eyes darted around. It was Julian. He just lost his temper. Look at me when you speak." Eleanor grabbed him, pulling him so close their noses were almost touching. Her eyes were webbed with frantic, red veins. "The maid saw it. Lily told me what happened. How long are you going to lie to me?" Caleb had never seen her like this. Panicked, he quickly changed his story. "It was an accident. I dropped it. I just wanted you to feel sorry for me, to care about me more." An accident? The storm in Eleanor's eyes intensified. An accident that so perfectly splashed only on the child's hand? An accident that you immediately blamed on Julian? "Caleb, what about the kidnapping? The security footage shows Julian never left his apartment. Who was that man in the mask? And why did Lily insist it was Julian?" Each question was a hammer blow, leaving Caleb with nowhere to hide. "Eleanor, how can you believe outsiders over me?" Tears streamed down his face as he tried to grab her hand again, but she flung it away in disgust. "It was Julian. He must have bribed the maids. He coached Lily to frame me. He's jealous of our connection. He's trying to tear you away from me. He's a twisted, manipulative psychopath," he shrieked, as if he were the one who had been grievously wronged. Seeing him still trying to pin the blame on Julian, Eleanor's voice turned to ice. Bribed them? Framed you? Caleb, at this point, do you really think everyone is a fool? The last trace of warmth vanished from Eleanor's eyes, replaced by pure, cold disgust. That look terrified Caleb more than any shouting. He finally understood that his performance was over. After the initial terror, a wave of reckless abandon washed over him. He stopped crying. Tears still stained his cheeks, but his lips twisted into a grotesque smile. Yes, I did it. I did all of it. So what? He screamed. Why should a beggar like him get to be Mr. Vance? Why should you be so obsessed with him? I wanted him gone. I wanted you to hate him. I hired someone for the kidnapping. I told Lily what to say. I wanted to ruin his reputation, to leave him with nothing. Eleanor stared at his contorted face, listening to his vile confession, and felt a wave of nausea. She wrenched her hand away as if she had touched something filthy and took 2 steps back. Caleb collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing into his hands, whether out of regret or fear. It was impossible to tell. Eleanor looked down at him, the last ember of affection in her eyes extinguished. Get out of this house. Now. No matter how pitifully Caleb cried, he and his daughter were packed into a car with their belongings. Eleanor had them taken to a separate apartment, with guards posted outside. After arranging everything, she collapsed onto the sofa, drained. Suddenly, the decor of her own home seemed garish and unfamiliar. Mr. Peterson, she said, her voice hoarse. Get everything of Caleb's out of this house, and restore it. Restore it to the way it was when Julian was here. Mr. Peterson hesitated. Ma'am, many of the master's old things. They were disposed of. Then find them. Buy them back. Eleanor's voice rose, her eyes red. I don't care what it costs. I want every single piece back. Mr. Peterson bowed his head and left. Frank, the driver, approached her, looking nervous. Ma'am, there's something. I don't know if I should say. Speak. That day, after we took the little master to the hospital, I was downstairs having a smoke. I saw Mr. Hayes leaving the hospital. He wasn't walking right. He was holding onto the wall, and his face was pale. And I think there was blood on his clothes. Eleanor closed her eyes, a sharp pain twisting in her chest. She immediately summoned the 2 guards she had left at the penthouse. The atmosphere in the living room was suffocating. Eleanor fiddled with the small wooden shark, her expression dark. Tell me exactly what you did that day at the penthouse. The 2 guards glanced at each other, then began to recount their actions, a hint of pride in their voices. Ma'am, we taught that man a lesson, just like you wanted. We held his head down and kicked him more than a dozen times. He coughed up blood right then and there. Then we dragged him out like a dog and threw him on the street. Crash! A crystal ashtray shattered on the floor. The guards flinched. Eleanor's chest heaved, her eyes so ferocious she looked like she could tear them apart. When did I tell you to touch him? Who gave you the right to do that? The guards' knees buckled, and they fell to the floor. It was Mr. Reed. He called and said you were furious, that you ordered us to teach the kidnapper a lesson. He said as long as we didn't kill him. Eleanor's hand tightened around the wooden shark. Its sharp fin pierced her palm, and blood dripped from her clenched fist. She tilted her head back and took a deep, shuddering breath, her eyes red with pain. Blacklist them. For life, she said, her voice dangerously low. Compile the evidence of assault and hand it over to the police. I want them ruined. The 2 men were dragged away, wailing. Eleanor was left alone in the vast living room, a crushing weight on her chest. So that's why he'd never contacted her again. While she was ignorant, he had endured that humiliation and pain. And the order had come from her poor, helpless childhood sweetheart. She grabbed her coat and stormed out of the house. Eleanor threw open the apartment door. Caleb was on the sofa. When he saw her, his face lit up. Eleanor, you came to see me. Her eyes were dark as she walked toward him and clamped her hands around his throat. Who told you to speak for me? Who told you to touch him? Caleb's face turned purple as he clawed at her hands. Eleanor, let go. No wonder you disappeared for a while after we got to the hospital, she hissed, her voice venomous. That's when you called them, wasn't it? No, I didn't. Caleb sobbed, tears and snot running down his face. The child, terrified, began to wail. The doorbell rang insistently. Eleanor, breathing heavily, let go. Caleb collapsed on the sofa, coughing violently. She went to the door. Detective Miller stood outside with several other officers. Caleb Reed, Detective Miller said, holding up a warrant. You're under arrest for kidnapping and conspiracy to commit murder. We have your accomplices in custody, and the evidence is overwhelming. The color drained from Caleb's face. No, Eleanor, help me. I'm innocent, he screamed as an officer cuffed him. Eleanor watched, her face a cold mask. As they led him past her, Caleb was still crying out. Eleanor, for Lily's sake, please help me. You promised you would always protect me. Tell the police everything, Eleanor said, her voice like ice. It's the only chance you have. The door closed, cutting off Caleb's desperate cries. The child was still weeping. Eleanor looked at her, her expression unreadable. Contact Child Protective Services, she told her assistant. Make sure she's placed somewhere safe. At the precinct, Caleb tried to deny everything, but when faced with a mountain of evidence, he finally broke. A day later, Eleanor returned to the police station. Detective Miller led her into an office. Ms. Vance, we have a clear picture of the case now. Caleb Reed has confessed to framing Mr. Hayes for kidnapping, coaching the child to lie, and ordering the assault. His goal was to drive a permanent wedge between you. As for the murder of Mr. Hayes, Detective Miller paused. He confessed to that as well. He hired a hitman. The motive was financial gain and the complete elimination of a rival. Eleanor listened in silence, her body rigid. I want to see him, she said. From behind the one-way glass of the interrogation room, Eleanor watched him. Caleb had calmed down, a twisted smile on his face. He suddenly spat on the floor and began to curse. That useless bastard talked a big game when he took my money, but he couldn't even bury a body properly. What kind of idiot picks a spot that gets dug up in a week? Son of a bitch. Even as a ghost, I'll haunt him. Eleanor stared at his contorted face, a chill running down her spine. Was this really the gentle, kind Caleb she remembered? Detective Miller spoke beside her, her voice grim. Ms. Vance, we've cross-referenced information with Interpol. He told you his wife died of an illness, and he was cast out by her family. The truth is, his late wife was a European crime boss. Drug trafficking, kidnapping, murder. She was killed in a police shootout, and all of her illegal assets were seized. Local police records show that Caleb Reed himself was a person of interest in several investigations. His wife covered for him before she died, which is the only reason he walked free. Eleanor listened, digging her nails so deep into her palms that they bled. The person she had felt so guilty for, the person she thought was a pure, innocent victim, was a viper. And she had not only brought that viper in her home, she had placed him right next to Julian. For a ridiculous sense of guilt, she had pushed for a divorce that allowed the viper to bear its fangs and cause this tragedy. Suddenly, Caleb's eyes seemed to pierce the glass, and he started screaming. Eleanor, I know you're out there watching. Yes, I did it all. So what? You think you're so innocent in all this? If you had trusted him, none of my plans would have worked. It was your suspicion, your favoritism, that gave me the opening. And now you regret it? You're playing the grieving widow? What's the point? He laughed, a high, piercing sound. Julian is dead. Stone dead. Buried alive. Do you have any idea how painful that is? I bet the person he hated most when he died was you. Even if he comes back as a ghost, he'll come for you first. Eleanor trembled violently and slammed her fist against the cold glass. She pressed her forehead against it, closing her eyes, but she couldn't escape Caleb's venomous words. Ms. Vance, please calm down, Detective Miller said. Every word he says is being recorded. Under state law, for kidnapping resulting in death and murder for hire, the maximum penalty is life imprisonment without parole. Eleanor slowly raised her head, her eyes bloodshot with hatred. Detective, she said, her voice ragged, as the victim's family, I will not accept any plea bargain. I will hire the best legal team in the country. I want him to get the maximum sentence. He needs to pay for what he did. Detective Miller led her to a quiet room and handed her a folder. This is a timeline of Mr. Hayes' movements in his final days. You should see this. With trembling hands, Eleanor opened it. The cold, black text detailed the last days of his life. Date, X. Time, X p.m. Admitted to XX hospital emergency room. Diagnosis, multiple soft tissue contusions. Payment for medical services. Cash, source, sale of personal wristwatch. Date X. Moved into rental unit at XX address, the Bronx. 85 SQ. FD. $600 per month rent. Dates XX. Daily employment. 6 to 10 a.m. Temporary package sorter at XX distribution center. 1 to 5 p.m. Dishwasher at XX restaurant. 7 to 11 p.m. Night cashier at XX convenience store. Every line was a red-hot brand on her heart. The papers crumpled in her trembling hand. She had frozen his accounts. She had blacklisted him. She had wanted to teach him a lesson. And the result was that he sold the anniversary watch, dragged his beaten body to a filthy 85-square-foot apartment, and worked 3 jobs a day just to survive. Until he was taken and buried. Her assistant quietly placed a velvet box on the table. Inside was the watch, which he had managed to buy back. Eleanor picked it up. The cool metal seared her skin. On their first anniversary, she had put this watch on his wrist herself. Vance Industries had just gotten back on its feet, and to support her, he had willingly stepped back from the corporate world, transforming from the brilliant executive assistant into the quiet Mr. Vance. Julian, she had promised him then, once the company is completely stable, you can come back and do anything you want. He had only smiled gently and said that seeing her succeed was his greatest happiness. His smiling face was so clear in her mind, but she could never touch it again. She instinctively pulled out her phone and opened her message thread with him. It was still stuck on that glaring red exclamation point. The last normal conversation they'd had was just before their 3rd anniversary party. Eleanor, my handsome husband, I know you want to look perfect tonight, but don't forget the time. Julian, I know, stop rushing me. I'm on my way down. Are you ready for your dashing husband? A large tear fell onto the screen, blurring the playful emoji he had sent. She knew now, without a doubt, that Caleb must have taken her phone and blocked him. Overwhelming regret and grief consumed her. She finally broke, covering her face and sobbing, her body racked with violent tremors. She was a fool. She was blind. It was her own arrogance, her own pathetic guilt, that had destroyed the most precious person in her life. After she had cried herself out, she looked up, her eyes raw. Detective, can I see him? One last time. The morgue was freezing. Eleanor's feet felt like lead as she walked toward the steel table. Each step was a hammer against her heart. The attendant slowly unzipped the body bag. Eleanor held her breath. The body was swollen and discolored, the face unrecognizable. A wave of nausea hit her, but she forced herself to look, to examine every detail. When she saw his hand, she froze. The nails were worn down, the fingers curled. On the ring finger was the faint indentation from years of wearing a wedding ring. But next to it, the small, crescent-shaped scar was missing. He had gotten that scar years ago, when he'd cut his hand making her a late-night snack during the hardest days of rebuilding the company. She remembered it perfectly. She had kissed that tiny scar countless times. But the hand on the gurney was unblemished. A wild, impossible thought struck her like lightning. This wasn't Julian. Julian wasn't dead. Wait. Eleanor's voice was a raw whisper. She looked up at the medical examiner. This body, it's not him. The me frowned. Ms. Vance, I understand this is difficult, but the DNA comparison is conclusive. The sample came from a hairbrush in Mr. Hayes's last known residence and was a perfect match to the victim. The comparison might be right, Eleanor said, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps, a frantic hope igniting in her eyes. But what if the hair on that brush wasn't Julian's? The bold assertion stunned everyone in the room. All the little details she had overlooked suddenly clicked into place. The easy way he had agreed to the divorce. The phone call she had interrupted. Who was coming to get him? Where are they taking him? She grabbed Detective Miller's arm. Julian's phone. Did you find it? There have to be clues on it. The detective shook her head. According to the hitman, it was thrown into the river. It's gone. The trail went cold. For a second, despair washed over Eleanor, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of hope. As long as there was a chance, as long as he was alive. She picked up the file again, her eyes scanning desperately. When she saw the entry, June 1st, evening, abducted near Kenwood St. Subsequently taken to the private villa of businesswoman Brenda Larson in Greenwich, Connecticut, the veins on the back of her hand bulged. Brenda Larson? Have you arrested her? Detective Miller sighed. We brought her in, but without the victim's testimony and no physical evidence at the scene, she denies everything. She has a top-tier lawyer and posted an enormous bail. She'll likely be out soon. Eleanor's eyes darkened, but she said nothing more. A few hours later, Brenda Larson strutted out of the police station. She was overweight and greasy, taking a cigar for one of her cronies and taking a deep drag. Damn waste of time, she muttered, before climbing into a gold Maserati. A few days later, a sex scandal exploded online, with Brenda Larson at its center. Immediately after, her company's products were found to contain toxic ingredients. The IRS launched a high-profile investigation, and several male employees came forward with accusations of sexual harassment. The walls came crashing down. Brenda Larson was ruined, her company collapsed, and she ended up in prison. The storm passed. One day, Eleanor drove to the rundown neighborhood in the Bronx. The police had finished their investigation of Julian's small apartment. Some of his things had been taken as evidence, but the rest was still scattered around the desolate room. The space was tiny and dark, smelling of dampness and decay. A flimsy wooden bed sat in the corner. Eleanor walked over and lay down on it. The frame groaned under her weight. She stared up at the peeling paint on the ceiling. There was no soft mattress, no climate control, none of the lavender scent he used to like. This is where he'd spent his last days. While she was playing house, enjoying a fake domestic bliss, he was here, alone and in pain. Her heart felt like it was being beaten with a sledgehammer. She touched the man's wedding band she now wore on a chain around her neck, her voice a ragged whisper. Julian, no matter where you are, I will find you. I will spend the rest of my life begging for your forgiveness. In this life, can we start over? Julian's eyes flew open, his chest heaving, a cold sweat on his forehead. The feeling of suffocation, the smell of damp earth, the sharp pain in his fingertips, it was all still there. The nightmare again, the one where he was buried alive. He took a few deep breaths, forcing himself back to the present. His eyes focused on the silk canopy of the bed, gently swaying in the morning light. The air smelled of sandalwood. The mattress beneath him was so soft it felt like a cloud. He sat up and looked around the spacious bedroom, decorated in an elegant, contemporary style. Sunlight streamed through a massive window, creating warm patches on the hardwood floor. Outside was a meticulously landscaped garden with a koi pond and a traditional pagoda. It all still felt unreal. He had actually escaped. In that dark, cramped crate, as the air grew thin, he had clawed at the wood until his fingers were raw and bloody. Just as he was about to give up, he heard a frantic digging sound from above. A voice, distant and muffled by the earth, broke through. Hang on, I was sent by your family. I'm getting you out. A sliver of blinding light pierced the darkness as the lid was pried open. A blurry silhouette leaned over him. Wake up. Can you hear me? Don't fall asleep. He felt a pair of slender but strong arms gently pull him out. The shock of fresh air burned his lungs, and he gasped once before passing out completely. When he woke up again, he was thousands of miles away, in this secluded seaside estate. His family, it turned out, was a powerful and discreetly wealthy business dynasty. They had thought he was dead, a victim of the human trafficking ring that had taken him as a child. His parents had passed away from grief and guilt years ago. It was his much older brother, Sebastian Thorne, who had taken over the family and had never, ever stopped searching for him. Young master, are you awake? A soft knock on the door, and a male attendant entered with a glass of water. Good morning. Breakfast is ready. Mr. Thorne is waiting for you. Julian nodded, pushing down the wave of emotion, and got out of bed. In the mirror, he still looked pale, but his eyes were calm. Downstairs, in the formal dining room, a simple but elegant breakfast was laid out on the mahogany table. Sebastian was already seated at the head. At 38, he was dressed in a tailored dark suit, his demeanor calm and composed. He had the same almond-shaped eyes as Julian, which gave his serious face a hint of youthfulness. Seeing Julian, his expression softened. Did you sleep well? Yes, thank you. Brother. The unfamiliar word felt strange but warm. You're too thin. Eat, Sebastian said, pushing a plate of croissants toward him. After a quiet breakfast, Sebastian left for the office, reminding Julian to rest. Julian wandered out into the garden. The early summer sun was warm on his skin. He sat in the pagoda by the pond, watching the koi swim lazily, a sense of peace settling over him. He wondered, briefly, how Eleanor was doing. Did she think he was dead? Did she feel even a little bit sad? He quickly pushed the thought away. Just then, the butler's voice sounded from the main house. Sir, Miss Ryder is here. Julian looked up. A tall woman was walking toward him. She wore a loose-fitting linen shirt, the top buttons undone, and matching cargo pants tucked into black combat boots. In her hands, she carried a large, ornate picnic basket that seemed completely at odds with her effortlessly cool vibe. She walked up to the pagoda, her eyes landing on Julian's pale face. Hope I'm not interrupting, she said with a slight smile, her voice clear and a little husky. Not all. Miss Ryder, please sit. He recognized her. It was the face that had pulled him from his grave. Chloe Ryder sat down across from him and opened the basket. I heard you had a rough time. Brought you a few things. She started pulling out containers. This is bird's nest soup, good for recovery. These are wild ginseng slices for stress. And this is royal jelly. An array of rare and expensive supplements soon covered the small table. Julian stared at the spread. Miss Ryder, thank you for saving my life. But this is too much. I can't accept it. Don't be silly, she said, waving his protest away. It was nothing. I had to. Had to? Julian asked, confused. Chloe's hand paused, and a faint blush crept up her neck. Yeah. Well, my grandfather and your father were old friends. Sebastian asked me to check on you since I was in New York on business anyway. I got there just in time to see some goon shoving you into a van. I followed them, and well, you know the rest. She said it casually, but Julian knew how dangerous it must have been. Thank you, Julian said again, his voice filled with sincere gratitude. I'm in your debt. Good, Chloe said, her eyes crinkling into a smile. Then you won't mind if I come visit often, and you have to take all this stuff, or you'll hurt my savior feelings. Julian was a little overwhelmed by her forwardness. Miss Ryder. Too formal, she interrupted. I'm Chloe. Chloe Ryder. 26, single. You can call me Chloe. Or, Chloe dear. She drew out the last word playfully. Julian felt his eye twitch. This felt suspiciously sticky. Seeing his expression, Chloe immediately backed off, holding her hands up in surrender. Just kidding. Chloe's fine, right? Julian dear. Miss Ryder, I don't think we're that familiar with each other, Julian said, a headache forming. I saved your life, and we're not familiar. Chloe feigned a wounded expression. How much more familiar do we need to get? Should I go dig another hole for you and save you again? Her logic was so absurdly shameless that Julian was left speechless. This woman wasn't just his savior. She was a world-class pest. So, the things the police found. Julian began, looking into her smiling eyes. My ID and the locket? Chloe's playful demeanor vanished. Yes, I found an unclaimed body with a similar build, and had my people swap the hair samples at your apartment. It was the fastest way to make sure everyone thought you were dead. The Vance family is powerful in New York. The only way you could truly be safe and start a new life was if Eleanor Vance was convinced you were gone forever. Julian fell silent. He thought of Eleanor's possessiveness, of Caleb's cruelty. Chloe's methods were extreme, but they were effective. Thank you, Chloe, he said softly, for thinking of everything. Her smile immediately returned. Words aren't enough, she said, leaning forward. Spend the day with me. As repayment. Julian was surprised, but seeing the hopeful look in her eyes, he couldn't refuse. Okay, he agreed. That evening, when Sebastian came home, Julian told him about his day. Sebastian smiled. That Chloe, she seems like a handful, but she has a good heart. It's good for you to get out and make a friend. He pulled a black credit card from a drawer. Buy whatever you like. Just have fun. The next morning, Chloe arrived in a bright blue convertible, dressed in a stylish white pantsuit. She looked at Julian, dressed in a simple white shirt and linen trousers, and her jaw literally dropped. Sebastian appeared at the door, giving Chloe a polite nod. But as Julian turned to grab his wallet, Sebastian grabbed Chloe's shoulder, his grip like steel. You take care of my brother, he warned in a low voice. Chloe winced, but nodded enthusiastically. Of course, Sebastian. I'll make sure he has the best day ever. And she did. They went to an art market, a Michelin star restaurant, and went horseback riding in the countryside. As the sun set, they ended up at an observatory. Under the vast projection of the cosmos, Julian looked up in awe, all the pain of his past life seeming to shrink into cosmic dust. Chloe didn't look at the stars. She looked at Julian, a soft, unfamiliar emotion blooming in her chest. That night, Julian gave Sebastian a gift, a simple silk tie. Sebastian's usually stern face softened. In a few days, he said quietly, I'll take you to see Mom and Dad, to tell them you're home. At the cemetery, it was drizzling. Under a black umbrella held by Sebastian, Julian gently touched the faces on the cold gravestone. Faint memories of his childhood surfaced. His father carrying him on his shoulders, his mother singing him to sleep. His shoulders began to shake as he wept. Mom, Dad. Sebastian's voice was thick with emotion. I brought him home. He's safe now. We'll be okay. On the drive back, Sebastian asked him, What do you want to do now? I want to study fashion design, Julian said. It was always my dream. Sebastian nodded in approval. Good. I'll hire the best tutors in Europe. The following months were peaceful. Julian immersed himself in his studies, his talent flourishing. There was no drama, no betrayal, just the quiet joy of pursuing his passion. Chloe was a constant, vibrant presence, dragging him on impromptu trips for inspiration or on adventures like skiing and rock climbing to relax. Julian found himself growing accustomed to her chaotic energy. One day, while they were sketching in a small, ancient town, Julian captured a perfect shot and excitedly turned to show her. Chloe, look. She leaned in close to see the camera screen. Wow, our Julian is a real artist. As he turned his head back, his lips brushed against her cheek. They both froze, then sprang apart, a sudden, awkward silence falling between them. Chloe's neck turned bright red. I'm gonna go get us some of that famous gelato, she stammered, practically running away. Julian's own cheeks were burning. Suddenly, a familiar voice, trembling with disbelief, came from behind him. Julian, is that you? The blood froze in his veins. He turned and saw Eleanor. She was thinner, her face gaunt, her expensive suit hanging off her frame. For the past 6 months, she had been searching for him, a desperate, worldwide hunt fueled by guilt and regret. And now, on a business trip to Europe, she had found him. Julian, it's really you. She rushed forward and grabbed his wrist. I knew it. I knew you were alive. Are you okay? Who saved you? Has anyone hurt you? Julian winced. Realizing her grip was too tight, Eleanor let go, only to throw herself into his arms, clinging to him. I'm sorry, Julian. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was blind. I should have trusted you. Her voice was choked with sobs. Julian, can we start over? Please? I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Julian remained silent and still, letting her hug a man who was no longer there. Hey, get off of him. Chloe stormed back, gelato forgotten, and shoved Eleanor away from him. Eleanor stumbled back, stunned. Chloe immediately fussed over Julian, checking his hands, his arms. Are you okay? Did she hurt you? The concern in her eyes was unmistakable. A primal, female intuition told Eleanor everything she needed to know about the other woman's feelings for Julian. Rage ignited within her. Julian, who is she? She's my friend, Julian began, his voice cold. I'm his girlfriend. Chloe cut in, puffing out her chest. And who the hell are you? Grabbing him in public? Julian shot Chloe a surprised look. Her ears were bright red, but she stood her ground. Eleanor's eyes blazed. I am his wife, she bit out. Legally. So who the hell are you? Chloe flinched at her intensity, but didn't back down. Oh yeah? Does he still claim you? She knew exactly who Eleanor was, and she wasn't about to let her hurt Julian again. Julian took a deep breath, his voice like ice. Eleanor, Julian Hayes is dead. Legally, I have no connection to you. My name is Julian Thornow. Eleanor's pupils contracted in shock. Just then, Julian's fingers gently squeezed Chloe's hand, and he laced their fingers together. Chloe's heart skipped a beat, then began to pound. Julian held up their joined hands. And I have a girlfriend now. So please, Ms. Vance, stop harassing me, or I will have a restraining order issued that will have you deported and barred from ever returning to this country. Do you understand? My ex-wife. The word stabbed into Eleanor's heart. In stark contrast to the joy blooming on Chloe's face, Eleanor stared at their intertwined hands, her eyes turning a dangerous shade of red. I don't believe you, she whispered, shaking her head. Julian, you're just angry with me. You're trying to hurt me, right? She took a staggering step forward. I know you're still mad. We won't get the divorce, okay? I was wrong. I really, truly was, she pleaded. Caleb is in prison for life. The guards who hurt you, that monster Brenda Larson, everyone who hurt you, I made them pay. Julian, I'll do anything to make you forgive me. Just come back to me. All my assets, the company, the real estate, the trusts, I'll sign it all over to you. I won't hold you back anymore. You can do whatever you want, go wherever you want, and I'll be right there with you. Julian, please just come home. Her composure finally shattered, and she dropped to her knees on the damp cobblestone street. The commotion had drawn a crowd. Her kneeling was the final act, and camera flashes started going off, a buzz of foreign languages rising around them. Julian felt a wave of humiliation, and he started to tremble. Chloe immediately stepped in front of him, shielding him from the onlookers, gently placing a hat and sunglasses on his head. Julian, let's go, she said, her voice soft but firm. Let's leave this crazy woman here. He gave a small nod and let her lead him away, never once looking back at the pathetic figure on the ground. Julian, don't go. Julian. Eleanor scrambled to her feet to follow, but she was blocked by several large men who seemed to appear out of nowhere. She could only watch them walk away, screaming his name until her voice was raw. That night, Julian told Sebastian what had happened. At the mention of Eleanor's name, the teacup in Sebastian's hand cracked. That woman, he hissed, has some nerve. He looked at Julian, his expression softening. Don't worry about it. I'll handle her. This is in New York. She has no power here. Meanwhile, Eleanor had her team investigate and quickly learned the truth. Julian was the long-lost son of the Thorne family, a discreet but immensely powerful dynasty that even she was wary of crossing. She began a daily vigil outside the Thorne estate. Day after day, she stood there, rain or shine, with increasingly extravagant gifts, a gemstone sculpture of a shark, an original Monet, but the gates never opened. One rainy day, she saw Chloe's convertible pull up. The gate opened for her without question. As Chloe drove past, she slowed down and shot Eleanor a triumphant, pitying look through the rain-streaked window. Before Eleanor could even think of retaliating against Chloe's family, Sebastian made his move. Overnight, several of Vance Industries' major European contracts were lost. Back in the U.S., their flagship electronics line was hit with a massive data breach scandal. The stock plummeted. Her assistants begged her to return to New York to handle the crisis. "The company can take the hit," she told them, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. She remained at her post. One day, the rain was particularly cold and relentless. She stood there until the world started to blur, a fever creeping up on her. Finally, she collapsed. When she woke up, she was in a guest room, the air smelling of pine. Julian was standing by the bed, frowning. A surge of joy shot through her. "Julian, you finally came to see me." He took a step back, avoiding her outstretched hand. His expression was so calm it terrified her. "You fainted at my gate. My staff brought you in. Since you're awake, let's get a few things straight." Eleanor's face went pale. "Let me remind you," he began, his voice devoid of all emotion. "I was with you when you had nothing. I took a knife for you. For 15 years, I thought you loved me. But you died with another man's name on your lips. You came back and immediately chose him. For Caleb, you locked me in a storage room, knowing my deepest fear. With nothing but a blurry video and a planted bracelet, you declare me a kidnapper and had your men beat me until I coughed up blood. You froze my assets and left me for dead. And when you found out Caleb wasn't the saint you thought he was, you got rid of him and came looking for me." Eleanor buried her face in her hands, ashamed to even look at him. "Eleanor, what is your love? Is it just a prize for whoever you feel most guilty about at the moment? You don't love me. You love the idea of me. You love your own self-pity, your own grand gestures of atonement." He pulled his arm away from her grasp. "You seem to be fine now. Please leave. I hear Vance Industries is in crisis. I'm sure they need their so." The door clicked shut, leaving Eleanor to her silent, shuddering sobs. Out in the hall, Julian took a deep breath. He looked up and saw Chloe, her face etched with worry. He forced a smile. "I'm okay. It's over." She seemed satisfied and pulled his hand. "Good. Now come see the antique nutcracker I found. It's over 100 years old." After that day, Eleanor never appeared at the gate again. Julian's life returned to its peaceful rhythm. One sunny afternoon, Chloe sat next to him in the garden, nervously fiddling with a blade of grass. "Julian, that day, when you said I was your girlfriend, was it real, or were you just trying to get rid of your ex-wife?" The paintbrush in Julian's hand paused. A faint blush crept up his neck. "It was just an act, to make her give up. An act doesn't usually feel like that," Chloe mumbled. "What?" The rest of his question was silenced by her lips on his. It was a soft, hesitant kiss. The world seemed to stop, the only sound their two hearts beating wildly. When they pulled apart, Julian was breathless, his cheeks flushed. The love in her eyes was so open, so honest, it stole his breath away. "Julian," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "From the first moment I saw you, I knew. Maybe even before that, when I would listen to Sebastian talk about his lost little brother. I love you, the real you. Will you be my boyfriend?" His face burning, Julian gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Yes." Chloe stared at him for a second, then let out a whoop of joy, jumping up and down. He said yes. He said yes. No takebacks. That night at dinner, they failed miserably at acting normal, their hands secretly clasped under the table, their stolen glances not fooling Sebastian for a second. His face was thunderous. After dinner, he summoned Chloe to his study. When she emerged an hour later, she was grinning from ear to ear. "Julian, your brother gave us his blessing," she announced, and added, "So how many kids should we have?" Julian choked on his water. "What? 2 seems like a good number," she mused. "One with your last name, one with mine." Julian was accepted into Europe's top design school. Before he left, Chloe insisted on taking him shopping. "It gets cold there. You'll need more cashmere coats. And these boots, they're insulated. And we need matching scarves." She was on a mission to buy out the entire store. "Chloe, really, this is too much," Julian laughed. "The family will provide everything I need." "It's not the same," she said, pouting. He softened, letting her continue her rampage. Afterward, they were feeding pigeons in the city square. Julian happened to glance across the plaza and saw a familiar, lonely figure sitting on a bench. It was Eleanor. She hadn't seen them. He looked away, a feeling of detached pity, the only emotion she stirred in him now. Suddenly, a gunshot cracked through the air. The square erupted in chaos. A man was firing an automatic rifle into the crowd. Get down. Chloe shoved Julian behind a large stone statue. He held her tight, feeling her heart pound against his chest. The smell of blood filled the air. He looked down and saw that her shirt was soaked in red. Chloe, he cried out. Her shoulder was bleeding profusely. She was pale, but she managed a weak smile, mouthing the words, "I'm okay." Tears streamed down his face as he pressed his handkerchief to the wound. A shadow fell over them. The gunman stood above them, the barrel of his rifle pointed directly at them. The next thing he knew, a body slammed into the gunman. It was Eleanor. She fought for the gun, a desperate, wild struggle. The sound of sirens grew closer. The gunman smashed the butt of the rifle into the back of her head. She crumpled to the ground, a pool of blood forming around her. He raised the gun to finish her, but another shot rang out, and the gunman fell, a neat hole in his forehead. The crisis was over. Medics swarmed the square. Chloe and Eleanor were both put on stretchers. Through a blur of pain, Eleanor saw Julian running toward them. She tried to smile, to tell him she was okay, but he ran right past her to the other stretcher. Chloe, stay with me. Look at me, he sobbed, his voice cracking. The hand Eleanor had weakly raised fell limp at her side. The last light in her eyes went out. 1 year later, late at night, the lights were still on in the top floor office of Vance Industries. After signing the last document, Eleanor rubbed her temples and, out of habit, opened the International Business News feed on her tablet. A headline from the Society pages caught her eye. Heir to Ancient Thorn Dynasty announces engagement to CHLOE, while the accompanying photo showed Julian in a bespoke tuxedo, his face alight with pure happiness. He and Chloe were kissing, the diamond on her finger flashing in the sunlight. A sharp pain lanced through Eleanor's heart. She tried to clutch her chest, but her right side wouldn't respond. She sat in her wheelchair. The blow to her head a year ago had caused nerve damage, leaving her partially paralyzed. The doctors said recovery was possible, but it would require immense willpower and long, painful rehabilitation. She had canceled her physical therapy session for the third time this month. After losing him, nothing seemed to matter anymore. She was a ghost, haunting the halls of the vast empire she had built, destined to live out her days alone. Her mind drifted back to a time long ago. Vance Industries had just been rebuilt. She had held his hand, full of pride and fierce sincerity. Julian, she had promised, half of this kingdom is yours. Now, the kingdom remained, more prosperous than ever, but there was no one left to share it with. The end.